Good day, BEd2 students. Welcome to our ED MC3 class, The Origin and Geographic Features of the Philippines. So practically, we're gonna try and situate where Philippines is located at in Asia and in the world. We're gonna look at the scientific theories on the origin of the Philippines is where, as well as the origin myths of the Philippines. Then we're going to talk about the geographic features and characteristics of the Philippines. And finally, we'll answer the question, how did these features shape us in our history? I know this is something very familiar to you. The Philippines is located in Asia and the southeastern portion of Asia. It is bound in the north by Taiwan, in the west by the West Philippine Sea, in the east by the Pacific, and in the south by the Celebes Sea. Recent development in politics, however, have changed some of these boundaries. The Philippines is home to 7,107 islands, but the number actually fluctuates, and so it's really much closer to a recent count of 7,641 islands. The reason for this is that sometimes the islands submerge because of climate change, or they discover new islands, or they could be taken from us. Approximately, it is 1,000 square miles from north to south. The land surface is 114,830 square miles. And the size and diversity of the features of the Philippines translates into things like the cultural diversity, the biodiversity, the presence of subcultures, and the strong maritime culture. The Philippines has 7 mountain ranges, and the largest and longest and the most majestic of this is the Sierra Madre, which you can see before you. The tallest peak is the Mount Apo, which can be found in Davao. In the island of Panay is the Mount Pajaas as the tallest peak. The lowest peak, on the other hand, can be found in the southeastern part of the Philippines, which is the Philippine Dip. Being part of the Ring of Fire, the Philippines is also home to many volcanoes. We have here Taal Volcano. These are some of the most iconic and majestic ones. We have also Mount Mayon, which recently erupted, and the Mount Pinatubo, which erupted in 1991 and was the second most devastating eruption in the century. The closest to the island of Panay is the dormant volcano, Canlaon. It's also the tallest peak. The Philippines is what you would regard as riverine. That is to say that most of our aspects of way of life and most of our aspects of culture in our sources come in and around or are related to the river. Some of the most majestic rivers that we have are Cagayan, iconic ones like the Pasig River, or over in the island of Panay, we have the Halaor River, the Iloilo River, which cuts across the city, and the Panay River. The climate of the Philippines is tropical. Don't get yourself fooled though. It is home to some of the most harshest conditions. For instance, there is the dry season and the wet season. The dry season happens somewhere in November and May, and the rainy season happens between June and October. There's a saying in the Philippines that if it rains, it pours. If it doesn't, it droughts. We move on into the theories about how Philippines came to be. One thing which was formulated in 1596, sorry, is the continental drift theory. It argues that the world was one large landmass called Pangaea, and that over the next series of millennia, the continents gradually drifted away from each other. The Philippines actually floats away from Pangaea, and in the same way that other continents floated away. Another theory is the land bridge theory. This theory argues that the Philippines is connected to the mainland Asia and that 25,000 years ago, you could walk across the Asia using these land bridges, where um, when the ice melted, the water level rose and the land bridges were lost, creating the archipelago that you find today. This theory was critiqued by both Fritjof Voss and Landa Hocano. Fritjof Voss, in particular, argued that an analysis of the crust in the Philippines and China does not show any connections. Another theory is the folding and folding theory or the diastrophism theory by Leopoldo Faustino. And this theory argues that the Earth's crust constantly shifts, bumps into each other, and move away from each other. And the island in the Philippines today are a product of this constant shifting plates. Another theory proposed by Bailey Willis is the volcanic origins theory. And he argued that much like the islands of Hawaii, the Philippines is a product of volcanic eruptions. One other theory that teaches between myth and science is the argument that Philippines was part of a lost continent of Meo. So if you are aware of the legend of Atlantis, supposedly there is another continent in the Pacific called Meo, which came crashing down and was lost to the sea forever. And the Philippines is one of those which remained of Meo. Moving on, we will talk about the mythological origins of the Philippines. One common feature of myth about the Philippines is the idea of the divine creation. This kind of myths argue that God, in his infinite wisdom, chose to create the Philippines and its people. And in here, you can see a sense of exceptionalism that the early inhabitants of the Philippines acquired. And you may also find another form of myth about the Philippines as being born as a result of a quarrel between divinities. The most familiar of this is the quarrel between the earth and the sky, and how the kite or the eagle or the falcon, in some cases, caused the sky and the sea to have this big battle, and at the end of it, Philippines was born. In some other cases, you have the argument between the two giants and they throw stones to each other. And these stones become the islands of the Philippines. We also have an Atlas type narratives, which is to say that there is this big, massive divine being like the biggest giant you've ever seen. And the Philippines is either part of his body or it is his body which is decomposing, or the giant could have probably dropped something and it came crashing down, splintered into pieces, and became the islands of the Philippines. To understand the theory of topography of the Philippines, of course, one of the best examples I like to use in particular is the campus of Niagao in University of the Philippines, Visayas. If you look at where the campus of Niagao is, it rests on top of the hill. If you go down, you'll see the coastal plains. Close to the town, immediately to the south, you will find the sea. And immediately to the north, you will find mountains. And all the communities live here interacts with each other as determined by their particular features of topography. So the Philippines is home to the same kind of diverse topography that you will find here in this campus. And the Philippines has the fifth longest coastline in the world. It's actually so long. It's longer than the continental US, and you can probably understand that this caused some form of problem for the defenders of the Philippines during the Second World War. They simply had no idea where the Japanese were going to land because this extensive coastline. And it's also home to a lot of coves, alcoves, groves, and bays and harbors. Maybe one of the most iconic that you know about is the Manila Bay itself. And it gives you the idea about how history is shaped by a certain geography. And for instance, the Americans fought with the Spaniards over Manila Bay, and the Americans fought with the Japanese over Manila Bay. And whoever controlled Manila Bay particularly controlled Manila. The Philippines also has a number of lakes. Some of the most iconic of this are Laguna Lake, Lanao Lake, and the Taal Lake. There are also waterfalls, and some of these are the most iconic and scenic beauties that are used in postcards and pictures. For instance, Pagsanhan Falls and the Maria Cristina Falls. The Philippines is home to 10,000 species of plants and ferns and 900 species of orchids. It's also home to some of the smallest animals of their species, such as the Philippine tarsier, the tamarau, and the pilandok, or the Philippine mouse deer, also known as the balabak chevrotain or pilandok. If you talk about marine life, the Philippines is home to 2,000 species of fish, 10,000 species of shells, and it's home to the Pandaka pygmea, the smallest fish in the world. The minerals that you can find in the Philippines are not only diverse, they're also abundant. Gold, for instance, is something we have been harvesting and mining since before the Spaniards ever came. We also have iron, copper, silver, platinum, chromium, manganese, lead, zinc, petroleum, asbestos, clay, gypsum, lime, salt, sulfur, marble, and adobe stone. Probably the lasting testament of our relationship with gold can be found in the Oton, Des- Oton Death Mask, which you can see before you. And the Philippines is also home to many scenic beauties. Some of the most iconic ones are the Ifugao Rice Terraces, the Hundred Islands, which you can find in Pangasinan, and the Chocolate Hills. One thing that happened to the Chocolate Hills, are, unfortunately, is that during a recent earthquake, the topsoil shifted, revealing the earth beneath it, and so the color has already changed. And we have also the underground river in Palawan. The most important question to ask about this lecture is, how does geography affect history, and how does the land affect us? One of the consequences, for instance, is occupational. For example, let's take a look at the sheer number of islands that we have. We just have adopted this multitude of islands by having a strong maritime culture. Fishing, boat building, communities which live far from the sea have adopted hunting. foraging, and or even farming. For instance, among the Ati or the Eta community, you can still find hunting very much alive. And the geography affects the kind of industries that we have. For instance, where clay is abundant, you have pottery industries. In terms of our culture, we are practically very ethnically diverse. Maybe the best example to think about how diverse we are is to look at the beauty pageants, especially the international ones where they tend to feature the best of the Philippines. And most of the costumes that have adapted elements from different cultures across the Philippines, sometimes on their own, sometimes combined with each other. And this diversity creates a very vibrant Philippines. On a more serious note, one of the social political consequences of the Philippines is that we develop some kind of regionalism. This is to say that the Philippines is divided according to regions, usually in and around ethno-linguistic groups. And therefore, when they try to think or imagine or draw lines of affiliation around the concept of community, it is based along these same regional lines. In that sense, it's very difficult to have a sense of nationalism. And it should be said, the Philippines is the first country in Asia to declare itself a nation, the first to conceptualize nationhood. However, we have experienced we what you could probably say as a delayed sense of nation, and you can see that happening today because well, many of the problems we're facing today emanate from a lack of this sense of nation. Another consequence of the geography that is socio-political in nature is that it was easier for foreigners to occupy and colonize us, divide and conquer, as they say. Finally, maybe this is a little bit more subtle, but it's also observable. There is an uneven development of communities between the upland and the lowland communities here in the Philippines. Although these communities might be closer to each other, it can be really difficult to get one community to access information, services, ideas, or even basic resources. Finally, we go back to where we started. Let's take a look at everything that we have talked about today. We have tried to situate the Philippines. We have tried to talk about the geography of the Philippines. We have talked about the scientific features on the origins of the Philippines, as well as the origin myths about the Philippines. And finally, we took a look at the consequences of the geography of the Philippines to history. It is the intention that this could serve as a framework for understanding later on in your course why Filipinos behave the way they do, why things happen the way they did, and how history is shaped. And that is all for today. Thank you for listening and have a good day. Bye.